I'm Charles,
And this is Emmanuel.
and you are listening to
Blight makes right.
the original Legion of Everblight podcast. Freshly back from the Americas Team Championship.
What?
Manuel, I missed you, brother. Should have been there.
I was in Milwaukee like the week before, and I had skipped Death Storm entirely.
I thought you were going to arrive like the day we were leaving. So did you end up showing up early?
No, right on schedule. I looked at the weather and said, I'm going to miss the week before and the week after snowstorm. So that leaves me like 2 days to fly in and out. And you know what? I've been doing this a long time, man. I'm pretty
Gotcha.
good at it.
Yeah, I feel bad for everybody who had scheduled to fly out on Monday. I had seriously considered just like, maybe I'll just like stay Sunday, like hang out with everybody into the evening. That sounds fun. And I was like, man, I got LVO in 2 weeks. I should get back. And I scheduled like a late Sunday flight. And oh my snow fucker, I am glad that I was not still there going into Monday. Because I'm pretty sure Mr. Freeze is trying to just fuck the US.
I live in California. It was like 70, 75.
Uh,
I don't have to worry about that shit. I pay for the sunshine tax, my friend.
Yeah, you do. But we have the Doug Hamilton hanging out in the chat. So
What? That's my dude. I love Doug. He is
huge
literally the
props to
best
Doug.
person. I would
So,
we don't want to go there.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I just spent like the whole weekend just looking at different Doug models pretty much the whole time. That was what was going on. It was sort of like my first round I got to play against a Legion mirror, and so it was, I got to see like Azrael on the table and Zuriel on the table. It was
nice.
It was just all Hamilton all the time.
It's a lot of the inspiration for my Thags list is being able to play as many Hamiltons as I can cram into a list.
Oh, for sure. And yes, the nerdiness will continue and goes on, probably terribly until everybody's sick and tired of hearing about Eyeless Dragons. But man, it was interesting. So obviously this is my first time doing the America's Team Championship. It kind of got rolling right as I was kind of rolling out of the game. But it was really cool. It was a fun way to start off the event. Team events are always really interactive. There's a lot of camaraderie because you're rooting for your team and you're rooting for other teams. And whenever you're going to start playing games, it's not just about how your games are going. There's a whole nother level of strategy to it.
I'm curious, Charles, what other teams were you rooting for?
Well, of course I had to root for Canada Beaver.
What? I mean, yeah.
Any Tim Banky team, I've, got their back.
Love that guy.
They didn't have a Legion player, but I was also rooting for the other double Legion team, Wolf's team. So, Sung as well. Like, I had to root for those guys. I was always checking in, seeing how he was doing.
I was hardcore rooting for Pagani's team.
Yeah. I had the pleasure of telling Pagani and Jay, I was like, by the way, you know that some people consider you the favored team going into this event? And they were like, wait, what? They do realize we haven't been playing War Machine, right?
Well, LVO right around the corner. Those are the kind of words I want to hear.
Yeah. Well, it was cool. I mean, I'll be honest, it's the least prepared I've ever been for any convention level tournament that I've ever done. So that part was definitely hard. There was no Mox event in January. The only tournament that was scheduled for January locally had to be rescheduled. I definitely wish that I'd been able to get in more games. Thankfully, Hank, one of our locals, I got in. I was able to get some another Ret game in before the event, the weekend before it. So that was definitely nice. But then I didn't end up playing against Ret at all. So still good practice. But Manuel, since you weren't there, like what sort of stuff do you think everybody wants to know?
Well, I mean, I like thought process. For myself, like when I go into battle reports, when I go to other people's podcasts, or even when we have people on our podcast, that's usually what I find the most useful when I get to the table is what were they thinking about going into this match and what did they learn from it afterwards. So I would be interested to talk about it match by match and say, in this match, what were you thinking about? What were you concerned about, and did it play out the way you thought it would, or did it play out differently? And specifically, since you played Callus, this is a good kind of case study.
Oh, for sure. And I will say, I brought Callus and Animag, and both my team and I knew that I really had no intention of actually playing Animag. Like, there was a
Aw.
few weird matchups that having a 7 Fury Warlock that could sit a little further back, camp a little bit more. Like, if I got into a matchup where I thought Callus is going to get killed, I might have played Animag for defensive reasons, just trying to keep the game alive. But there was a round that actually may have been during the game, I was starting to think, actually Animag may have been better into this matchup. But for the most part, it was Callus all the time, all day.
We can talk about that when we get to it, for sure.
Yeah. So round 1, I ended up getting the Legion mirror with the team. The player's name was Francesc. Super, super nice guy. And it was actually funny, like, going into the game, he was like, if I lose about this game, you can joke about me losing to you on the podcast. And I was like, dude, nobody is going to give you shit for losing a mirror match in Legion to me. Like, that is just not something that I think anyone has ever gotten shit about. But to be honest, like, I was very actually happy to get the mirror in that first round, because one of the things that was concerning me the most going into this tournament is just, I have not played against every faction in Mark III, and there is tons of shit that I just do not know what it does. And so going into it and seeing that he had Callus and Lilith. And if you remember in the last episode, when we got to his lists, I was like, this is what I consider basically like the standard thing that I would see Legion players bringing right now. Kind of like an old school, like Veil 1 Saren combo, like back in 2011. Right. That
Without a
was,
doubt.
I think, seeing Lilith, and especially since it's a champs matchup too, right? Like, you could easily see someone bring that to champs and also play it in masters. So, like I said, I thought he had great lists, but I didn't know if he was going to drop Callus into me. I thought most likely he was going to drop Lilith, and that did end up being the case. And so we ended up with Callus 1 versus Lilith 1 in Children of the Dragon. So I got to see all the Hamilton models. He had, obviously Zuriel, Azrael, double Raptors, Kralix. But to be honest with you, this game kind of went the way that I expected it to go. He won the role to go first. He wanted to go first so that I don't take the whole board from him. And then I went straight up 5-0 in scenario. It was, I popped feet bottom of 1. He popped feet top of 2. The hardest part, I think, is he saw a good opportunity to parasite the Warmongers and get a lot of work done on them during my feet turn. And the problem was the Warmongers weren't really threatening the board nearly as much. And so he ended up doing really good work on the Warmongers, but then that kept too many of my models that were threatening the zones really aggressively. So just every Raptor that he left towing into the zones died. So I clear the zones, I go up 3-0, and like, I'm all over the board. Like, I'm pushing way past the midline. And he even comments, he's like, I went first and you were like pushing me back into my deployment zone. I'm like, well, that happens to gunlines. But he wasn't even able to like clear out everything that I had stuck into his zone, so he scored 0. And I went straight up to 5-0. So
this is a good case study for both of these lists. I think that you and I, and we kind of talked about this when we had David on the podcast, we really like having Primal Terrors go second. It's got a great scenario game. Hellmouths get up there and contest the world. Like, I prefer and choose to go second 90% of the time when I play PT. I just feel it favors the list build. I also think that playing Children of the Dragon a lot recently is not a list that does well into contesting the whole scenario. You're going to have to play a trickier game. When I went on scenario, it's the really live scenarios where I can go up by 3 and pop an objective and do some tricky things. But it doesn't have the model count that like a Primal Terrorist list does. And so the scenario pressure from the beginning was on. I think his biggest mistake was letting you go second.
Honestly, I do not disagree. I think with the speed of the Raptors and their threat range, he puts me in a really awkward spot if I go first. Because if you think about it, the Raptors are going to be up 10 inches base, and then they can walk 9 to their 19. Then they shoot 12. So right there, you're talking about 31 inches plus my 9 inches of deployment. That is not a very large window for me to walk forward. So I really don't get to take that much of the table. Um, and otherwise, he's potentially killing a lot of stuff like bottom of one, and that can be rough. Now, the downside of that is if I stay outside of his threat range and just move up a little bit, then I'm taking way more of the table on turn 2, and that's when I'm popping my feet. So it'd be hard to say, but I think I agree overall. I think if you play into that match, especially in a really aggressive scenario, you've got to be really careful about letting a Callous player that's going second. And you probably have to contest more. Like you probably have to put a beast in each of the zones. I'll say that was one of the things that he did that scared me the most is he really put Zuriel up in my face. And so I was very concerned about dodging him into a really bad position. And so because he did some spraying, he did some murdering, and then he used his animus. And there was points where I'm like, I just didn't make attacks on him. I'm like, vultures are going to just land around him. And I just did not want to risk doing the wrong attack that lets him evasive into like some scary position. And I didn't even want to think about it. I'm like, I'm just going to make sure that he dies. And
it's a good plan.
That worked out. But I think on the flip side, if like probably have Azrael toe into one zone and Zuriel toe into the other, just to like try to make it as hard as possible for me to take points. But
well, it was an interesting case study for me because I play both of these tiers and I play different casters, but to see it played out and to see some of the advantages you had, I thought it was really cool. So good job.
yeah,
You know, one of the other things I want to say real quick before we move on, and I think that this gets overlooked a lot, is the fact that going second matters a lot for PT because of the extra 2 inches you get on deployment as well. Like, when you're already getting an advantage on deployment over your opponent, then you get an extra 2 inches, then you have distant deploy models on top of that. You already own a lot of the board before the game even starts. You're like deploying into, walk distance of zones and stuff.
For sure. I will note that so Pagani, I believe, ended up going like 4-1 himself overall. And he said the only game he lost was the game where he went first. Yeah, he went all 4 of the games where he went second. He was playing Grimkin. So it's just kind of an interesting topic of conversation just about whether you choose to go second, choose to go first. I went second all day long, both by choice and by force.
Absolutely. I've gotten a lot of questions on that specifically recently, even like going and playing games, but also like kibitzing and watching other people play. I watched a Chromac player play into Goreshade 2 very recently, and I thought, man, like this is going to play out very specifically because of how the roll-off went. And man, I couldn't have been more right.
Yeah, there's definitely some games where it tilts it. And I'm going to say, totally off subject, I find it very amusing that opening my beer was loud enough to have the image switch over to me.
Awesome.
I thought that was pretty great. Okay, so round 2. I honestly, going into round 2, I did not feel like I had a great matchup on that particular team. So I told David, like, hey, man, just use me however it gets the team better matchups. Because I was just looking at their list and I'm like, man, there's a lot of shit I haven't played against. There's a lot of shit that I don't think Callous is the perfect drop into, stuff that's going to be hard for me. And what they ended up wanting me to take was Mercenaries. So perfectly fine.
Jumped on the grenade literally with that one.
Yeah, quite literally. And so it ended up being Ostrom versus Callous 1. It was a very interesting game to finally play. Like, it was at least one that I had watched JVM play, and that was the one where I'm like, oh, so sad watching the Blightbringer just get murdered. Was a rough thing to see coming out of War Machine weekend. But my opponent was super nice. It was kind of a weird game because we also had like lunch announced during our game, so we had to pause it to go grab food, which was a little weird. So we like tried to like at first I was like, well, why don't you finish your turn so we're not like coming back and trying to remember which models have activated and which ones haven't. Like just you finish your turn, then we'll go get food. And we sat like away from our table so we weren't like monitoring it and like evaluating strategies and stuff like in our head as much while we stopped to eat. But it was a super close game, and it really ended up coming down to I was holding things off, and I think I had a chance to still potentially win on scenario by the as we got to turn 7, and he was able to kill Callus. Like we had probably 2 minutes total left on our clocks between the two of us. And the problem is at that turn, I needed Callus to get away from his stuff. And the direction that I needed to run was directly into a forest. And so I ran him as far as I could, but he was still able to get one of his jacks to me and like knock me down and murdered Callus with, like 50 seconds or something left on his clock. It was a super close game, great game. Like we really like dragged out. It was a dirty slugfest. Taught me a lot about playing into Ostrom. Definitely a good lesson. That was the one where I'm like, his little gun bunnies are so good at murdering the birds and the incubi that it may have been one that the Animag list would have been better into, just because it would have an improved armor swing and, doesn't have the single wound infantry that his sprays just murder. So that was something, thinking about it, like as we were playing, and I'm like, I could see like Animag or a more aggressive, like something with more armor swing being pretty good into this. Because honestly, I got it to the point I was like 3 damage away from swinging one of the zones into my favor. We just had 3 damage left on a gun bunny. I think I rolled a little bit above average, so it wasn't going to be like an average thing that I'm able to kill all the stuff he put in, but it was rough. At least there was a point kind of mid game where I was able to get Anastasia and Iris off the table, which
That's a big deal.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a mistake or not. I wanted Iris off the table because I was really worried about her shooting off all of Callus's fury because he just can't get away from her. And he has enough guns and stuff in his list that there's no way I'm going to actually block line of sight to Callus. And so I was very worried that if she stayed on the table, that there would just be a round. He'd just shoot off the fury and he'd have enough guns to put Callus into the dirt. And so even though it wasn't a zone that I was expecting to score points on, I wanted her dead anyway because I felt like it prolonged the game in a safer, more like I could play it out. I don't want to say predictable, but in a more controllable way, maybe.
Absolutely. Getting Iris's threat off the table gave you some breathing room.
So I don't know if that was a mistake or not, because it may have cost me the ability to actually clear the other zone. But really, I wanted her dead. Like I like taking assassination off the table as much as I can. But I will say that that Forge Guard weapon crew is pretty baller. He was getting some crazy damage in with that thing. That thing was just launching missiles into me. That guy,
yeah, the weapon crews these days are way better than they used to be, and I have since learned to respect. I mean, Crucible Guards made me respect them a lot more.
Oh yeah,
but in general,
Guard has got like some crazy stuff. So, but yeah, so that was round 2. Thankfully, obviously, I was not playing into a matchup where my team was like expecting me to win in that particular round. We got other good matchups, but we were still playing against a really strong team. I believe it was one of the Florida teams, so we knew that it was going to be a tough round regardless. So we ended up pulling that one out 3-2, I believe. And so we advanced. We're 2-0. And going into round 3, we get the other Florida team. And so we were going straight into some really hard, tough matchups. The Florida meta is really prepared. But this time, the way that the matchups go, I end up with Khador. And so he's got Armor Core, and it's matchups that I have played before, and it's on a scenario that's really good for Callus. Like, the way my team was talking about it was just like, Callus can't lose in this scenario. Triple flags, like, diagonally across the middle. And I ended up, on my table, there was like a castle, not like a square house, like a rook, like right next to the center flag. And I'm pretty sure that thing almost by itself was just like, Callus is not losing this game. Because it really jammed his Vlad 2 list into going around that. And there was not as much space where he could come in and contest the center flag. And so it really put me in a strong position where essentially the game happened very similar to the round 1 game, where I came up really aggressively on turn 2, or on bottom of 1. I'm pretty sure I bottom of 1 defeated. He's got enough of the Khador solos that have the boosted die rolls versus infantry models. I forget the name of that particular Man of War or whatever. But I played into his stuff, so I knew he was going to shoot a lot of birds off the table. So it kind of went the way I expected. Again, I went up 3. I went up, I believe, 3 or possibly even 4. I forget. Like, I went up really aggressively on scenario, and he came back and was only able to score 1 point. And then then going into the next turn, there's a point I'm like still killing stuff, and like Jeremy Lee's standing by me. He's like looking at the table, trying to figure out what's going on because I'd already won. And I hadn't realized that I had won. Because I was thinking that it was going to take me another turn, but I was already like going to score enough points that I was going to go up. What happened is I was able to score a point at the end of his turn, so the score was 4-1. He could not get in and actually contest the flag that was closest to me. So I scored, and it was 4-1 going into my my bottom of 3. And so all I had to do was score 2 points. So once I cleared out the stuff that was in the center zone, I was already set to be able to score. So I think it was a pretty rough game for my opponent, but at least that one I was prepared for. So I felt pretty comfortable in it. I was kind of nervous about it because I was like, this seems really good for me. This is a good matchup for me, good scenario, good table. If I fuck this up, then I really deserve the shit.
There are a couple interesting things that you said that I wanted to come back to. The first being that you had that piece of terrain that was so defining for the matchup, like that rook house, right? The guard house. And man, it's sad that that happens sometimes to players where you're like, this scenario and this terrain completely dicks my list. And I've had that happen to me before. As a slow attrition player back in the day, there were just tables that I'd walk up to and go, well, Minoff has no answers to that. I'm sorry.
Well, as you say it, I think if he had kind of like switched his deployment, it may not have been so bad, where he had the slow conquest going into his zone, and then he had like the battle engine and all of the infantry trying to come up into the flags. And I think if he had switched it, he could have gotten conquest just up far enough to like be contesting his far flag, and then his faster stuff, like, and there would have been less terrain screwing over the Man of Wars. They could have come up more aggressively then and not been pinned so much by that terrain. So maybe it was kind of a placement issue. So I don't know exactly what was going through his head about what needed to be where, but I was definitely not going to be able to score his zone either way. So the big thing is his ability to contest the 2 flags that are closest to me. And I think just the way that he ended up deploying made all of his Man of War kind of like get trapped by that guard tower essentially, and it made them so they could kind of get to my zone eventually, but he wasn't able to put enough in there, and so I was just able to clear it out. And when it was like, basically, if you can kill these 3 models, they got like 8 wounds each, but if you kill them, then it's game. And that needed to be more. There needed to be more jammed into the zones. But
the other interesting thing that you said that made me consider something was that you said Callus just wins the scenario. My team just felt like there's no way that Callus just doesn't win this scenario. And I think that's really important to point out that, one, Callus does have some really strong game into some of the current scenarios, and more than a lot of other people. And 2, it makes me reconsider my Thags 1 list and go, that's another scenario tool in my bag that I should consider when I look at the scenario and the table, is because I have flight in that list and I have the ability to make incubi, there may be times where that comes into play really big on specific tables, both terrain-wise and with incubi for the flags.
Yeah, for sure. Now I'm just trying to like double check off the top of my head the name of the scenario, but it's the only one with 3 flags, which I believe is Mirage. I am so total. I'm sure I'm going to be wrong. No, I'm right. It is Mirage.
You go, girl.
But yeah, Mirage is a really, really tough one to beat Callus on. Like that's one where Callus can play through worse matchups and still get ahead. And one of the big things that I was practicing in these games is one, don't get Callus killed. So I was trying to be careful to not Dark Guidance when I didn't need it. And then additionally, like put models in front of Callus, block line of sight, just keep Callus alive, and be very, very like Hellmouth placement has become like an art form.
Preach.
Where so I know everyone's really scared. Like it's so funny when I'm playing a game and people are like, all right, I'm going to position this guy here and this guy like this so that you can't like drag this guy in. And I'm like, yeah, you got it, buddy. Because I really have no intention, like unless someone really, really messes something up, like I don't really drag stuff into the Hellmouth. Like, yes, it can do that, but really I kind of expect my opponent to play around it. That's not the purpose. Like I'm putting the Hellmouth in spots, like I'm putting the Hellmouth down and then checking 8 inches to make sure that I can drop a tentacle into contesting spots. And that has become one of my key things where I've really hated it late game where I'm like, I want to just place a tentacle here where it doesn't trigger counter charge and I can just put the tentacle there just at the start of my turn, drop the tentacle into the zone, and boom, it's contested and I can just go about my business and leave that tentacle there. And so
I agree.
That's become a big part of how I place Hellmouths. And so it's like, yeah, if I drag something in at some point, sure. And I have done it. Like there was a couple times during the tournament, but it was mostly to like make it a little bit easier. Like I'm gonna pull this thing in so the Nerf like doesn't have to charge. It can just like walk up to it, and you know just kind of smooths things out so the Nerf's not as far forward when it kills it and then it sprints back. But it really hasn't been a big part of my game.
I've had some pretty epic drags, but you're right. Most of them have been opportunistic. I think a lot of my best plays with them have been when I'm like, okay, this tentacle engages this whole unit, and you didn't have anything over here that could dislodge them, and so that unit doesn't get to charge this turn. Or like just the added recursion on top of an already heavy attrition list sometimes is the tilting point. I think you're right. The drag is really it. And when you said it's not the point that they get dragged. But I think the point is that they have to play around it. And that word presence itself is worth every penny.
So we were able to pull out this round. We go 3-2 again. I mean, it was a super challenging team. This was a round that easily could have gone the other way. And so at this point, our team is 3-0 and we were in the top 4.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we're like, guys, we could actually do this. And so there was some really funny conversation because Purrier is like, I don't want to go to the WTC. But anyway, so I walked over to Banky before this round and I was checking in because somebody had said that Canada Beaver lost. I'm like, that seems like a lie. I'm going to go check that. I walk over.
Was a lie.
And no, they had pulled it out. So whoever was spreading that rumor, fuck you. But checked on Banky and, you know, we were joking around and I was just like, Banky, I would love for us to play each other in this tournament. Can it be tomorrow morning and not today? And he's like, we'd love to play you too. And but anyway, so pairings happened and we were playing against Canada Beaver. So I got paired into Charles Soong. So we had the Charles off, which was at least okay. Like I was a little bit more worried about the other Scorn player. Not that Charles isn't an amazing player, because he is, but at least he didn't have Makita 3, and I thought my matchup into Morgul 2 and I forget what his other Warlock was now. I think it was Xerxes 2. But either way, I felt like my matchup at least wasn't quite as bad into him. But I remember, because basically what we did was we pincered him with both of the Legion players. And so it was like, choose which Legion player do you want to play against, David or Charles? And I remember hearing Banky say, everyone else would rather play against him. And that was not what I was expecting to hear. And so Soong took me because basically the rest of the team wanted to avoid my lists. And so that was very interesting, especially considering Banky was playing Protectorate, and I kind of thought he would wreck me. But that's probably from a position of inexperience into the matchup right now. But we talked about it a bit afterwards, and he was like, no, he's like, I had you down as a 1 out of 5. I did not want to play against you. You were a rough matchup for my lists. I was like, oh, interesting. Good to know. Maybe the Protector matchup's not as shitty as I thought it was. But Charles Soong and I had another, it was basically the same as round 2, where it was like, we went all the way to crazy, crazy late game, and it just was a drag out dirty slugfest. And I think we had less than a minute 30 seconds left on our clocks. Like it was it dragged down to the bitter end. And it was a great game. I learned a lot against playing against Charles. And I think if the game was probably closer than, let's be honest, both he and I made mistakes. It was the 4th round of a long day. He multiple times was forgetting to use the Supreme Guardian's ability to put troops back on the table. And I made a huge mistake looking back on it going into round 2. I had not positioned my Chosen to threaten the zone. And so his putting just a few random things at the edges of the zones was a whole lot more problematic. I didn't threaten quite hard enough. I thought he was going to come into me harder, and he didn't. And so my lack of threatening the table just a little bit further was a pretty big mistake, and it made it so I really didn't go up on him more than 1 point. I did end up with a plan to potentially kill all of the things that he had contesting one of the zones, but in the process, I did things slightly out of order, and instead of running up one of my birds to stop the Bronzeback's countercharge, he ended up being able to countercharge into the zone, which just stopped me from getting the point. But anyway, long drag out dirty game that Charles, he was able to take, and I lost that one. But this matchup, more so than probably any of the other, I was like, Charles Soong is an absolutely amazing player, and I'm really inexperienced right now, and I have not played into his matchup. I've never played against Morgul 2 before. Like back in Mark 2, like early Mark 2, I played against Morgul 2. And I didn't even realize Banky was in this chat. Love that guy so much.
Got mentioned twice this podcast.
Yeah. But it was just one of those little things that there was a lot of ways that I felt like I could have played into that scenario better, but it was out at the same time. I wasn't mad at myself because I was like, man, I've learned a lot more about how I want to play into this scenario with Callus. So that's one of my big takeaways from this is I feel way more prepared to play into that scenario and how I need to play into it. And Charles was a fantastic opponent. Very, very clean player, and I loved the game. That was probably the game I learned the most from. And so, yeah. So I lost, and so we're 3-1. But then we went out and drank and ate with the Canadians. Was what happened next. So that was super fun.
Well, and 4 solid games. You know, it's funny, prior to this conversation, you had said to me, man, I don't know if I feel prepared for LVO. And I'm like, motherfucker, you just went to ATC. I'm over here trying to get garage games going.
I will definitely say I feel way more prepared for LVO after doing the ATC. Like I said, I learned a ton. And we don't have to drag into it so much. Overall, the team ends up going 3-2. We lose the next round to the Molly Whoppers. Their Legion player, Donnie, super cool. I love looking at his list. He was playing Callus 1, Callus 2. Again, was something I talked about. And he actually mentioned to me, he's like, when I was listening to your podcast, I kind of wanted you to stop talking about my list because you kind of got it. And I didn't want people to realize what was coming. And I remember warning per year about Donnie's list. Yeah, Banky, that would work. Win LVO, get a spot on the team. It's not like LVO is going to be just a monster house of badass players.
Yeah,
But
I'm really hoping that I don't scrub out to a scrub in like the first round. Like that way, I mean, I'm gonna play every day over the weekend. I'm gonna try all the qualifiers, but I'd
oh, for sure.
really, really love to get like to round 2.
Right. That I think that's a rough spot for everyone. And I felt it particularly when I went to Poland in the WTC. I was like, oh God, just as long as we don't lose round 1, right? Like, and I felt the same way about like the Iron Gauntlet World Championship. I felt the same way about War Machine Weekend. You just like in your head, you're just like, can I just get through the first round, please? Just through the first round at least, and then at least the pressure's off a bit.
I have to say though, going into LVO, I feel better than I have any other con that I've ever prepared way more for. Nothing against all of my prep that went into all those other cons, but I have something very zen going on with both of my lists right now, and LVO is kind of my stomping ground. Like I've already got one of their trophies sitting on my wall right over there. So for me going back, it's like I feel more at home. It's like playing in your home store. You don't necessarily have any advantage there. You just feel more comfortable.
Well, like Tim Banky's being such like a cheerleader in the chat right now, hoping that we both do well, and that he's happy that we're back in the community. And I'm just thinking, I want an Arcane Assist T-shirt to wear at LVO. That would be fantastic.
Doubt.
Oh man,
yes,
I need Arcane Assist swag so bad.
Without a doubt.
So
it's funny. Banky's come up a lot in this podcast, but he's come up a lot in our personal conversations too, where we've just been like, who's the voice of like streaming gaming right now? Oh, it's just Banky. Like, okay, sure. Whose list are we like looking at and really like just dissecting right now? It's Banky.
Yeah. I hear him mentioned a lot, which is very interesting because when I was playing before, Banky was pretty much a judge.
Yeah.
And that was his primary focus. And now I have people saying like, oh man, this entire faction just like what Banky says is what this faction adheres to. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Whoa. They're talking about him being a big representative for trolls, a big representative for Ret. So, but I will say, like, I'm going to compliment Banky one more time. At the end of Mark II, I could not listen to very many people talk about Legion. Like for the most part, if I listened to a podcast and they were trying to talk about somebody's Legion list, all the hair on the back of my neck would stand up and I'm like, oh my God, it's like these guys have no idea what they're talking about.
I can verify this. He's called me in hot sweats and been like, Emmanuel, I can't listen to this garbage anymore.
But
Banky's okay.
I could always listen to Banky talk about Legion. That was one of the few people I could listen to Arcane Assist, and when he would talk about Legion, I'm like, ooh, that's a really interesting take. Tell me more. Banky always seemed to have his finger on Legion better than the average person, so I always appreciated that.
I really like listening to his understanding of things. He seems to just look at things and have a good understanding of how it should work and where it fits in. And that's one of the things I've always appreciated. And it's not like the matter-of-fact dick slinging where some podcaster just like, this is the matter-of-fact way of things. But more along the lines of
do this or you're wrong.
Yeah, he's not like that. It's like, logic says that this is exactly where this should fit in. And I think that if you apply it correctly and explore it in this realm, you could use this tool correctly. And I'm like, yes, more of this.
Yeah. I think I'm going to have to rename this episode. It's like ATC wrap up and loving Tim Banky.
Yeah, I loved his expression on Animag and how he talks about her being like a pointed nuke. I play her very much like that.
For sure. And I mean, while we're throwing out Arcane Assist, I'd also say that Tactical Tips is easily my favorite podcast to listen to. So
what?
For sure. So while we're still talking about ATC, before it's just all Tim Banky all the time, I want to say like one of my favorite things coming out of this one was how much I learned, even though this was like my worst performance of any game. And before I completely move on, I want to give a huge shout out to my 5th round opponent, Danny, probably the nicest guy I met the whole tournament. Old school RFP fan.
What?
Nice. And there was like a weird moment at the end of this game where he was really worried that like it came across the wrong way. And I'm like, no, dude, don't even worry about it. Like we're late into a game. There's like a minute left on the clock. Like I misunderstood, it's totally cool. Like I don't blame you at all. Like, And the guy was really wanting to make sure that we were just having a clean, good game. And that I think just shows like just how strong of a player he was. He soundly got me with Iona. I think, I mean, mind you, he had some bad rolls, but I think if I had had just a few more minutes and was able to play that matchup a little bit faster, and there was at one point like a tentacle like got knocked off the table. I think it was my fault. I don't even remember what happened, but I had to like find it. It was like missing. I'm like, last thing I want going into LVO is have to like find and buy another Hellmouth just so I have a sixth tentacle. And so I was like finding it. It took like a minute or two, and it just, it was just one of those things like wish that you had those couple of minutes because I kept getting to points where I just couldn't make every attack that I needed to, and he had some bad rolls that potentially was going to keep me in the game. And but anyway, Danny was an
Just
absolutely
to clarify,
fantastic player.
you said 6 tentacle.
Sixth, yeah, because there's two
Tentacle.
Hellmouths. Yes. It's called a tentacle, but I know it's not actually a tentacle if you're going by biology.
Hey, if you got 6 tentacles, man, whatever works for you.
Tentacle, yes. Um, but anyway, like even though it's probably my worst, no, not probably, it is definitely the worst record I've ever had at a convention tournament ever, easily. But I learned so much, and my biggest takeaway from this was one, my Callus 1 list is amazing. And all I have to do is learn my matchups and play it faster. And so at least my list building is where it needs to be because I have a list. It's really strong. It's not quite what people are expecting. Other Legion players that were seeing it were like, I think I need to play this list. I'm like, it's amazing. Play it. But also, despite my lack of matchups at this point, like the lack of games, I'm still probably at like 30 games into Mark III. I was able to hold my own against some really strong players that have been playing a lot more than I have. And so that gave me a really positive view. Like I am progressing back to the level where I was at faster than I expected. So I'm not there yet, not by a long shot, but it was good to know that I'm getting back to that point in a
competitive
just faster than I expected.
Yeah.
And I still learned some interesting things. There's still like, I'm not going to talk about it just yet, but there's a potential change to the Callus 1 list, like a small little shift that I think could potentially improve my matchups even more, but it needs a little bit of testing before I start throwing it at everybody.
I like it. I'm all on board.
But I've got like a week to figure out what I'm going to play at LVO. Obviously, the Callus 1 list is still coming. I'm feeling very confident about it, but I need to figure out exactly what my off lists are going to be because I want to bring a little bit of extra punch with it. Because one, I also don't want to just get totally bored of Callus, and if I'm just playing him all the time, I'll get sick of it. And so I need to figure out what my off list is going to be. So that's been my big job right now. But man, ATC was a good show. Reminded me a bit like the Intermountain Cup, where it's not a full convention, but you're getting to see a lot of cool people, and it is like one event. But then it also has a lot more people from a lot of different areas. It had, obviously like the whole Tim Banky's team, Canada Beaver. People came from all over the place. And it was a 2-day event. So it was kind of this midway between kind of a local convention and a full-on convention. So yeah, it was very interesting. I love the team format. So I think there's a very, very strong possibility that I will be planning to go back one way or another.
Year. For sure. I want on a team. Like, I mean, this was super impromptu that we were even coming back to War Machine, let alone Media World and conning. But sure. I like the team format quite a bit, and I want to get on a team. And I mean, my team at LVO won the team tournament. I'm not going to take all the credit for that, but we played it so much and practiced it so much. There's just a different dynamic in the way you think about things. It's really interesting. But speaking of a different dynamic about the way you think about things, you were saying Callus 1, still trying to find that perfect pair. Earlier we had mentioned the Callus 1, Callus 2 approach. I want to come back to that because I think that you used to be the Veil 1, Veil 2 player, right? Like that was your thing, and you had a really good approach to it. And both of them covered different things, but played in similar ways. It had tools that you liked, but I think you could do that again. I think there's the room with Callus 1, Callus 2 to do something like that. And we had you've been blowing my phone up with all kinds of list ideas since ATC, which I love it. Like I'm absorbing it all. I don't even have time to answer them all, but every one of them I'm like screenshotting them for later, and I'm like, okay, yes, now I have screenshot 1 through 7 to study when I get home tonight. But um, I wanted to just throw out there that I think Callus 2 may be a good area for you to explore. You haven't really dipped too much of a toe into him, and he's a new warcaster, and it seems so ominous to play the prime epic versions of casters.
Yeah, I mean you're definitely not wrong. It definitely appeals to me. I really liked Donnie's Callus 2 list, the team that we faced in the last round. He didn't play that list versus Jeremy, but
Tell
I
me
really
about his
like his
list. I
list.
don't
Yeah,
remember the
so
list.
it's still Primal Terrors. It's double chosen with Warmongers and Gorag. Then it has a War Chief. It has Amok, as you'd expect, and then it's the double Hellmouth. So right, it's like a lot of the basics. So the question is,
Yeah.
what else does it have? Obviously, Golab, and then the two other pieces are the Rake and a Scythian. This is probably where if you're the average person, you're trying to like figure out how to build this list. You probably built most of that as it is, and it's the Scythian and the Rake that really seal the deal. That's kind of the 24 points of flex. Unless you were trying to run birds, and then maybe you don't need to run the War Chief, but that's kind of the package. And so it's like those are the two question models. And I was trying to explain to people that the key of the Rake is that it delivers fire where you need it. It has such a huge threat range, especially with Overrun. It has stealth, and the fact that Callus allows him to deliver fire somewhere that sets up for some really crazy assassination runs, or just, if he just needs to set your Colossal on fire and then charge it with a bunch of Chosen and Golab, right? And Banky's absolutely right. Like, he can literally set something on fire with a headbutt. And so that can be a knockdown model that also is on fire, which means now free charges and +3 speed from the feet. So
and auto hits.
Right. Like there's a lot to do there. And so I think the Rake is an easy pick there. It just serves the perfect spot. It's the best model to just deliver fire into some weird ass position.
Okay. 2 heavies and a light.
Yeah, and then Scythian, people are like, why the Scythian? Why not like the Carnivian? Well, obviously there's some points concerns there, but the Scythian has Murderous. Also, it has access to Grievous Wounds, which is something that, even potentially Callus 2 could use himself. So all of these things play into it. And Banky is 100% right. The list is very heavily tacked to be able to play into Menoth. And Menoth has always been kind of a trouble matchup for Legion. Like from the moment I started playing, like Avatar with Defender's Ward just sucked. Like that was so hard to beat with a lot of our lists because we were playing like Lilith 2 and Saren a lot right at the beginning. And, we didn't even have the Naga yet. Beating up on the Avatar was tough. So Menoth's always been a rough matchup. And it's not really any different now because Adjudicator's a baller. Like it's got great casters. Menoth can be rough. And so definitely bringing something like that brings all the fire protection. I could easily see like there is definitely a real potential going into LVO that I steal Donnie's list while giving him complete credit. It's a fantastic list. I like what it does.
I want to support the choice of the Scythian because, like, there are a lot of other. Okay, so you've got Overrun. You've got great speed heavy with reach, and like you said, Murderous and all the other advantages. So it can take advantage of all the tech that's already there. It adds with Golab to a lot of the just tech that you want and the matchups you want it. And it's also a good throwaway beast. Like because Callus can kill things himself, he can really set up a trade where you end up with Callus on the board and nothing to oppose him.
Well, and its base threat of 10 inches is not really that scary. But in the Callus list, it does potentially threaten 18, which is a whole lot scarier.
Exactly.
And I mean, Donnie said this out loud. Obviously you got to keep in mind, like the Scythian can go up, murder some stuff, and then overrun into other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, so he can just get more troops than what you were expecting him to get. And that could potentially be clearing out a zone and scoring a point, which can be huge. Um, so I definitely dig the list. There is a real possibility that I play
Shit.
his list
I'm
point
like
to point.
just callous away from that list myself. Now I'm like, LVO, audible to an extra list in my bag. Can I fit it?
Well, you're bringing all those models anyway, right? Just not Scythian. Like that's the only
Well,
thing you need.
I'm not bringing Golab, I'm not bringing the Scythian, and I'm not bringing the Rake, and I'm not bringing Callus. But that's only 4 models to stuff into my like nooks and crannies.
Yeah. Wrap it up in your Blight Makes Right t-shirts and just shove it in your bag. That's how
I'm
I
gonna wrap
traveled
it
with
up in
my
something and
Blightbringer.
shove it in something. That sounds
Yeah.
delicious.
Um. But yeah, I mean the
Right
Callus
back on
2
topic. I
list.
love you, Charles.
Oh, I know. I mean, if I were to play that list, all I have to have is a spot on the trade for the Scythian and the other unit of Chosen and the Rake. Right?
Doable.
Like it doesn't really it technically it's more models for me because my list doesn't have the second unit of Chosen, but if I'm not putting a Blightbringer on my tray, I think I have the space. So I could absolutely decide to go Callus. But I'm not sure. I have some other lists in my head. And all right, so the only spoilers I'll give before I go into it, I am seriously considering both Rias and Veil 1 as potential off lists. So all I'm going to say right now, but these are serious considerations, which seems strange, but there's reasoning for this. I'm not a snowflake. I don't pick to play like a random caster because I'm like, oh, I need to be special and different. I will absolutely just play Veil and fuck everyone. So if I determine the Callus 2 list is the right play, which very potentially it is, but I have these other 2 lists that I've been bombarding. It'll be like I come up with this list and then I'm like sending Emmanuel like slight variants. Like
Yes.
here's it with like 5 points different. Like trying to like narrow it down. I'm like, I don't have a lot of time to test. Which ones should I test?
Well, and the great thing is, like, so he's like, I'm considering Rias, nothing else. Doesn't explain it, doesn't, and then he makes me wait. I'm like, oh really? And then I'm like, I wait a little while, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna send him another message. Maybe he didn't get the first one, like a Desperate Girlfriend. I'm like, tell me more. And he's like, okay, here's all the tech. And I'm like, okay, but wait about. Well, let's talk about this and this. And he's like, but wait, there's more. And he gets real deep into the jank bag, and he pulls out from the precipice some gold nuggets. And I'm like, that looks delicious. Like now you got me thinking about rice. I think that was like the end of that conversation. I'm like, you don't need to convince me to put more things in my bag, Charles.
But now, come on. Like, I feel like if any Legion player like needs to get a hold of their buddy and be like, dude, I'm seriously thinking about playing Rias. Period. Pause. Like, don't send anything else. That is the only way to begin that conversation. You need someone to check their phone, like on the toilet at work, and just be like, la 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 la. Oh, apparently Tim Banky. Tim, oh, I'm hearing from Tim. This is great. You're thinking about playing Rias? What the? Tim, I need more information. If you speak to the crazies, I need to know.
Man, if Tim ever texts me on the toilet, you better believe I'm going to jump all over that text. I'm going to be like, Tim Banky text me on the toilet. Honey, I'm going to be in here in a minute.
But yeah. So yeah, there's a few different lists that I'm considering, and I got to figure out my champs off list. I mean, it'll probably be Thags, but there's still the potential it could be Veil 2 or Lilith. Man, if Rias or Callus 2 or Veil 1 was on champs, that would probably seal it for me. If one of those were in there, I would probably just pick that one so that I can practice the same thing for both events. But none of the 3 like main casters that I'm thinking about for my off list are in champs, so gotta practice a few more. But always happy to give Banky ideas, always happy to give the community ideas, and we want to keep promoting positivity. Like, this is one thing that more so than anything else, coming back to Legion and coming back to Mark III, I think sometimes the CID ends up kind of, not intentionally, but it makes people think, I need to wait for the next CID, or I need to wait for the CID to fix blank. And that's when you're going to like solve the problem. And what it used to be in Mark II was if a list came out and it was like, this list is amazing, what are you going to do about it? You weren't like hoping that Privateer Press changes it, or like hoping that the next CID gives you an answer to it. You just start looking back through all of your cards and going, what am I going to fucking do to deal with this? And the answer is generally rakes. And so, and
Oh,
so,
the good old rakes.
yeah. And so I approve of Donnie's list because it means the answer is, again, a rake. So we'll see. Some of my other lists also have rakes in them. But man, I'm excited for LVO. I'm excited to see everybody again. I'm excited to play some more games. Like, more so in a long time, I am just ready to play some War Machine. Like, let's roll some dice. Let's move some dragons across the table. Let's kill some models, some vultures, some half dragon ogre monsters.
Blight makes right, Charles.
For sure. But yeah, like, I think we should probably close it out here. We've been talking for about an hour. Lots of Blight make right stuff to happen, but we wanted to get this out there because we got LVO coming up real quick, and we may even do like an LVO prep episode, and we'll probably do some live stuff direct from Las Vegas.
Definitely.
Maybe even some short stuff like straight from the phone. Probably some stuff from the condo where we're staying. But absolutely, whether you're a listener to RFP or Blight Makes Right fan, like, we'd love to hang out with y'all. So hit us up if you see us. You know, obviously now it's probably a little bit easier to see our faces since we're doing a lot more YouTube shows. But see the Blight Makes Right shirt, say hi. We always love talking Legion tech, especially if you've got some cool ideas and stuff. You just want to talk lists. We're not privateer press employees, so we actually play this game, and we love talking about it. So feel free to share your ideas. Let's talk. Let's go deep into the jank tank. I'm all about it. Whatever you got. So
speaking of deep in the jank tank, Charles, do you
have... just end it. Speaking of deep.
Hey. We are neighboring next to the chain attack guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Speaking of the jank tank, do you have a Blight Makes Right moment for us from the ATC world?
Let's see. The funny thing is my my wins were both like very soundly on scenario. So I'm not sure if that really like you're sorry. So just if you're not following in the chat, Doug's like, what the fuck? We play. Doug plays. Doug plays for sure. It's just that joke was meant to be more may not make as much sense, but as someone who's works and like lives around the privateer press guys, a lot of time when they're off work, they don't want to talk about War Machine. They want to talk about the brand of board games they're playing or D&D. Like, they spend all day talking about War Machine
or the games they're creating.
Yeah, or the like, you know, the other games that they're working on and their Kickstarters and all that stuff. Sometimes they need a break from the War Machine conversation. So my point was more of just, hey, we're ready to talk War Machine. We're excited. Yeah, playing a little Keyforge too. Might bring some Keyforge decks to LVO, but I am totally pumped. And this is something I never do. I played a game against Jeremy Lee before the tournament Friday night at the ATC, just because I need games. I need to play against stuff. I need to learn matchups. I need to learn what everything does. So I'm just absorbing. And probably the saddest part is I wish Doug was coming out to meet us at LVO.
Oh, I know, right?
That guy's the best.
Well, and here's the thing. So to LVO and anybody that's going, I am bringing several bottles of the Game of Thrones scotch with me, and some of the
stuff. You are just really trying to get us messed up, is what you're saying. Like, you want me. You realize I've lost a lot of weight. I cannot drink the way that I did before.
Some of this stuff's like $500 a bottle, Charles. Like, it's scotch that, like, I have the whole set, and then I have like a secondary set that's like broken up, and I've given pieces to people. I do have a Targaryen for you.
Of course,
it's very expensive.
You know, I'd love to believe that I'm Targaryen, but I'm worried that I'm not actually Targaryen.
Okay, so let's have this discussion real quick, because this needs to happen before I give you a bottle of Targaryen.
Yeah. I would love to be Targaryen. In my heart, I believe I'm Targaryen.
In your heart of hearts.
Yes. But I might be Lannister, let's be honest.
You know, I could see it. You're not a Stark? Like all the Winterfell snow bullshit you love?
I am like, I love the snow aesthetic. I could live. Well, no, I don't want to live in Milwaukee. That was way too much snow. No, I'm not a Stark. Let's be honest. They're good people, and I would totally respect, and I would ally myself with Starks anytime. I got to be honest. I'm not a Stark.
You know, winter is coming, and I like to watch it from my lawn chair in California. Like, the winter ice zombies ain't crossing shit in the California deserts. I'm going to tell you that right now. I'm going to just sit here and watch y'all snow shovel shit on Facebook.
Oh, Banky's my bro. Lanagarian.
Nice. Okay.
All right. Yeah, like I definitely, when I was playing the Game of Thrones card game, I would very often play Targaryen with Lannister.
Man, as much as I would love to say that I'm a Targaryen, I'm definitely a White Walker.
That's not even a house. What's your house? This is like when you're like, which Ninja Turtle? Splinter. That's not one of the Ninja Turtles. Which house are you? Doug's like, I'm a Martell. He is totally a Martell. That is perfect. No manual. Manual may have froze. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up. But totally hit up in the comments. I want to know what your house is. April O'Neil. God bless. Oh man, I was totally watching Persons of Interest on Netflix, and I realized that the Zoe character is the same actress that played April O'Neil in the second Ninja Turtles movies of my childhood. That was the best. But all right, everybody. We'll have more Blight Makes It Right for you next week. We'll have stuff direct from LVO. We'll be back at you very soon. Peace out, everybody.
Later.
See you more.